Hello and welcome to the Comics and More podcast. I'm Patrick Markfort from Articulate Nerd.
And I'm Dave Ferraro from Comics and More. And this week we are going to do kind of a Disney-themed podcast. We're going to talk about two highly anticipated releases of our archival projects from Fantagraphics. Carl Barks' Donald Duck from Disney, and Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse from Floyd Gottfredson. And it's kind of interesting because obviously Disney owns Marvel, and they still chose to go through Fantagraphics for this archival project, which definitely gives props to Fantagraphics, since obviously Disney could see that they did really great work with bringing these archival projects to light in these great formats, especially with things like the Complete Peanuts in the past. I'm sure they took a look at that kind of thing. So, I'm glad Fantagraphics is doing it just because, they have these really beautifully designed books. First, we're going to be talking about the Floyd Gottfredson. And that's a great design. So you get to kind of see the strips on it and stuff. But basically, Mickey Mouse is kind of an adventure strip. And this is from the 30s. And it kind of starts out with a story where Mickey and Minnie kind of, Minnie learns that she's kind of going to inherit this house. And these crooks try to make it seem haunted so she won't want it anymore, and she'll want to sell it to a crooked banker for really cheap. Meanwhile, there's this there's something hidden in the haunted house that's really valuable. So that's why they're trying to get her to get rid of it, so they can kind of have it for themselves to kind of seek this treasure out. And I think that's a great way to start it out. I think it's actually one of the strongest stories of the entire collection. But I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in here, some thieving gypsies at one point. Mickey goes into boxing. He's framed for stealing eggs from Minnie's parents. It's a lot of good stuff in it, and obviously it has that, nice humor edge to it. So everything's pretty funny and stuff like that. But since it was a newspaper strip, it does get a little repetitive at times, but that's kind of the nature of newspaper strips. For every time you pick up that newspaper strip, you kind of want to know what's going on. It doesn't necessarily do a recap every time or anything like that, but they kind of let you know through the dialogue that, this has kind of happened before.
Right.
So, that can be a little tedious when you're just reading it in one big chunk. But otherwise, I feel like it was pretty consistent. Obviously, the art is great. I love the designs for the creatures, the lions and stuff like that in here. And it's just a lot of fun seeing them kind of maneuver through all the environments. It was fun seeing them in the haunted house. It was fun seeing them going across this kind of western landscape with the desert and cactuses on the way to Death Valley, and the forest where they meet the gypsies. So it's a great book. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. I thought it was a great book. Both of these books that we're reviewing this week obviously have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's common to them, for me and probably for a lot of people, is that they were so highly anticipated. I mean, for years and years, I've hoped and wanted Floyd Gottfredson's Mickey Mouse to be reprinted in some kind of a complete sequence, and I kind of didn't really think it ever would be. I didn't really know that Disney would, allow a company to do that in the way that Fantagraphics is doing it, kind of highlighting the art of Floyd Gottfredson over and above Walt Disney, although the book is called Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse by Floyd Gottfredson. So I just love that these two books exist at all.
Yeah, they were obviously gaping holes before in comic collections.
Especially the Carl Barks one, and so it's just terrific that these are both out now. I just love it. So I really enjoyed the Mickey Mouse material. You're right; it's uses all these kind of great 1930s adventure tropes. So they're really fun adventures. Very energetic, kind of manic cartooning style by Floyd Gottfredson. I think that's what he really brought to the character. Beyond his really sharp story construction skills, which is a trait he shares with Carl Barks. He just builds these really great adventure stories for these characters. But beyond that, his cartooning just has a real energy to it. And the characters are constantly in motion. There's always big droplets of cartoon sweat like flying out of their heads. It just has this real kind of infectious manic energy that I really enjoyed. So while I wouldn't quite, based on the work here, and I'm far from a Gottfredson expert, so I don't know, there may be better work later. Based on the work here, I would not put him in like the top tier of the great strip cartoonists like George Harriman, Charles Schulz, E.C. Segar, but he's up there. And it's definitely one of the great comic strip projects. So this is a welcome addition to what is unquestionably a golden age for archival comic strip reprint collections. I mean, now with Mickey Mouse and they're doing Nancy, I think pretty much everything is in print or soon will be in print and available in these handsome editions from a variety of publishers. So Mickey Mouse is a great new addition to that. Beyond my interest in it as one of the great all-time comic strips, I think this volume is equally as interesting as a piece of Disney memorabilia and Disney history for people who are interested in Disney, and Disney has a lot of fans that aren't necessarily comics fans. Primarily because the Mickey Mouse comic strip was one of the very, very first translations of those characters into a media other than animated short films where they first appear. Like, this is one of the first licensed, Disney efforts. And in fact, Walt Disney himself, along with Ub Iwerks, key animator at Disney, as aficionados of that company know, themselves began the strip. Walt Disney himself was the original writer of the Mickey Mouse comic strip. Very shortly, they turned over the reins to Floyd Gottfredson. It was supposed to be a temporary assignment at the time, and of course, he went on to do the strip for years and years and made this masterpiece, always anonymously, never signing the strip under his own name. So, as a piece of Disney history, it's fascinating. And I think Fantagraphics, and this is true again of both of these collections, does a good job of not making the archival, introduction and extra material so overwhelming that people who maybe are just interested in Mickey Mouse or just interested in Disney couldn't pick it up and just really enjoy it, as well as like hardcore comic strip aficionados. They find a really nice balance in their presentation of this material. So it's really good. And for the differences in the Mickey Mouse that most people are familiar with today, as opposed to how he appears here, it's also a fascinating book, because the Mickey Mouse of Floyd Gottfredson is he's a bit more of a rougher edged character than the kind of super kid friendly. I mean, there's really not much character to Mickey Mouse these days. I mean, there aren't really Mickey Mouse cartoons. He's just kind of this cute corporate icon that's come to represent the Disney company. And here he's more of a character. He's a young, man, or I guess a young mouse. He lives in a very particular kind of rural community. He's a bit of a scrapper. And there's a lot of like kind of un-PC material in here, which is, kudos to Disney for allowing this to be presented in its original unedited form. I found it equally as fascinating as a piece of Disney history and Disney memorabilia as it was, an important piece of the puzzle of, the early days of the American newspaper comic strip. So it's a success on all levels. And there's a second volume out. Yep, we're just talking about here the first volume, but the second volume has recently been released with a lot more to come. Gottfredson did the book for a long time, so it's great stuff. Yeah,
and I think you really did find a nice balance between like simple enough stories where you can get it as you're just picking it up in a newspaper, you know what I mean, reading a strip, but complex enough to kind of hold your interest throughout the entire story too. Yeah. So he found a nice balance there, and it's a nice balance of characters. I mean, you don't do really much with them. You don't really get too in depth with them, obviously, but you get enough of their personality to shine through. Each of them are kind of distinct. Like all the little characters that come in here, like Minnie and the cow characters, that it's just enough to really make it an enjoyable, kind of light-hearted, kind of adventure strip.
Yeah, it's a great book.